All right, ready to dive into a world of strategy and power.
I'm ready.
We're going deep into Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power.
Oh, this is a good one, a classic.
It's basically like a guidebook, right?
Yeah, for understanding power dynamics, how they work, how to navigate them. Green pulls from all these historical figures, emperors, con men, you name it.
He really makes it come alive, doesn't he? It's
Yeah.
not just some dry theory.
Yeah.
So today what we're going to try to do is break down these 48 laws
Yep.
and help you guys listening figure out how you can actually use them in your own lives.
Exactly. Because, let's be real, these power dynamics, they're everywhere.
Leading a team, negotiating a deal.
Even just trying to understand, like, the world around you.
You'll start to see these patterns.
It's like you get this secret decoder ring.
Exactly. Okay, so before we get into the individual laws, Greene makes this interesting point.
Okay.
He compares modern power dynamics to those old school courtly games.
Oh, that's so true. It's like a modern day court. It's still about maneuvering, alliances, those unspoken rules.
And he quotes Machiavelli to really drive it home.
Oh, what's the quote?
He says, "Any man who tries to be good all the time is bound to come to ruin among the great number who are not good."
Mm,
A little bit cynical, maybe,
yeah,
but there's definitely some truth to it.
for sure.
Okay, so with that in mind, let's jump into law number 1. Never outshine the master.
Ooh, this is a big one.
It's all about how do you manage the perception of those above you,
Yeah.
those in positions of authority.
Okay, imagine this. You're Nicolas Fouquet,
Okay.
finance minister to King Louis XIV. Super brilliant, super ambitious.
Okay, I see where this is going.
And he's like, I think I'm falling out of favor with the king. Got to do something big.
So what does he do? Throws the most extravagant, over-the-top party the world's ever seen.
Makes sense, right? Win back the king's favor.
Right, except it completely backfired.
Oh, no.
Instead of impressing the king, it made him feel super threatened.
I could see that.
Louis XIV saw this as a direct challenge to his authority.
Right, like trying to upstage him. Exactly. And Fouquet ends up imprisoned for the rest of his life.
Wow.
So it's a good lesson. You can be the most talented person in the room, but if you make those above you feel insecure, you're playing a dangerous game.
The key takeaway is make your superiors feel secure, even brilliant.
Yeah, and it's not enough to just be competent, right?
Right.
It's about managing those perceptions, understanding the psychology of the people in power.
So have you ever been in a situation where maybe a colleague or a boss felt threatened by your success?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And honestly, I think it happens all the time. People feel threatened when someone else's light's shining too brightly.
And how did you deal with that?
I think the key is just to be really generous with your praise.
Oh, I like that.
Acknowledge other people's contributions. Make it clear you're not trying to steal anyone's thunder.
Yeah, it's about being strategic, not just in what you do, but how you present yourself, your accomplishments.
Exactly. Perception is everything.
So we've talked about not outshining those above you. Let's move to a law that plays on this whole perception thing in a totally different way. Law 17.
Okay.
Keep others in suspended terror. Cultivate an air of unpredictability.
Okay, this sounds a little bit intense.
It is. It's almost counterintuitive. You might think, to be powerful, you need to be loud, assertive, in control.
Yeah.
But this law says sometimes being a little bit unpredictable can be surprisingly effective.
Okay.
Keep people guessing what you're going to do next.
Okay, I see.
Greene actually uses Louis XIV, the Sun King, as an example of someone who used this really well.
Oh, interesting.
But he didn't use, like, outbursts or tantrums. He used silence.
Silence.
Strategic silence.
Yeah.
So instead of constantly issuing commands or revealing his thoughts, he would just hold back.
Ah.
And it kept people in this state of anticipation.
Oh, a little bit of fear.
Yeah, just a little bit of fear, never quite knowing where they stood.
And you've worked with a lot of leaders. Have you ever seen anyone use this tactic?
You know, I have. And it's really interesting to see it in action because it can be very effective, especially when you're in a position of authority. People kind of fill that silence with their own anxieties and projections.
It's like you're creating a vacuum,
Right.
right? And people rush to fill it with their own interpretation.
You're basically controlling the narrative without even saying a word.
It's so subtle.
Yeah, really powerful.
Okay, so we talked about not outshining those above you and being unpredictable. What about when you need to win someone over?
Okay.
Earn their trust, even if you have an ulterior motive.
Okay.
That's where Law 12 comes in. Use selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim.
Okay, this sounds like there's a story coming.
There is. Greene tells this amazing story about Victor Lustig, this con man who was so good, he actually managed to con Al Capone.
No way, Al Capone.
Al Capone,
The gangster.
the gangster. Now, you wouldn't think someone like Capone would be easily fooled, right?
No, not really.
But Lustig knew that even the toughest criminals crave a genuine act of honesty.
Okay, interesting.
So he approached Capone with this business proposition, asked him to invest a bunch of money.
I'm already suspicious.
Right, Capone was too, naturally. He's not going to just hand over his cash without some kind of assurance. So Lustig does something really interesting. Instead of some elaborate scheme, he plays it totally straight. He returns to Capone after the agreed-upon time, says the deal went bad, apologizes profusely, then returns all of Capone's money, explains he couldn't bring himself to cheat a man like Capone.
So he lost money to gain Capone's trust.
That's exactly right. It was a calculated risk, and it paid off big time. Capone was so impressed with this honesty, he gave him a reward, essentially fell for Lustig's carefully crafted act.
Wow, that's incredible.
So this story shows how even a single act of honesty, especially when it's unexpected, can totally change someone's perception of you.
It's like a Trojan horse. You use that little bit of generosity to disarm someone, to lower their defenses.
Open them up to further influence. It's like to gain power, sometimes you have to appear to give it up.
Now, that brings up this fascinating point about actions versus words. And that leads us to Law 9. Win through your actions, never through argument.
I love this one.
This really resonates with me. I've always believed that.
Yeah.
Actions speak louder than words. But what's Greene's take on it?
He has this great anecdote about Michelangelo. So Michelangelo just finished his masterpiece, the Statue of David, and this critic comes up to him, points out what he thinks is a flaw.
Uh-oh.
The nose, he says, is too big.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine how frustrated Michelangelo must have been.
Right, after all that work, all that passion to have your masterpiece criticized.
Yeah.
But here's what Michelangelo does. He invites the critic up onto the scaffolding with him, hands him a chisel and some marble dust, says, okay, you fix it.
Oh, I love that.
Of course, the critic, when faced with actually having to improve on Michelangelo's work, realizes, I'm way out of my depth, and he just slinks away, defeated. Not by words, but by action.
It's so much more powerful, elegant,
Right.
so much more effective. It's about letting your work speak for itself.
Yeah.
Having that confidence to just let your actions prove your point.
Think about all those times you've tried to convince someone of something. Did you try to win them over with arguments? Or did you let your actions demonstrate your point?
That's a great point to reflect on.
Now, this idea of strategic action takes us to a law that's a little bit more, shall we say, ethically ambiguous.
Okay.
Law 14, pose as a friend, work as a spy.
Ooh, that's juicy.
It's all about information gathering, understanding your target better than they understand themselves.
Ooh.
Greene uses Joseph Duveen as an example. He was this legendary art dealer,
Yeah.
known for selling these incredibly valuable pieces to the wealthiest people in the world. So what was his secret?
Yeah, what was his secret?
He was definitely charming, but his real power was his ability to understand his client's deepest desires, anxieties, aspirations.
I see.
And he wasn't afraid to do a little reconnaissance. So one of his most famous clients was Andrew Mellon, incredibly wealthy banker, huge art collector. Duveen knew to win Mellon over, he had to understand his tastes.
So did he, hire a private investigator, break into his house to see his art collection?
Nothing quite so dramatic.
Okay.
He got himself introduced to Mellon at a party. Throughout the evening, he just chatted with him, seemed genuinely interested in his opinions. But all the while, he was gathering information.
So he was posing as a friend, but secretly working as a spy, basically.
Exactly. Which is why this law is so ethically tricky. But it highlights how important information is. The more you know about someone, the more effectively you can influence them.
Like having a secret weapon, right?
Exactly. You can tailor your approach, anticipate their moves.
But where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
When does information gathering become manipulation?
Yeah.
That's something to consider.
Now, while we're on this topic of information and understanding your opponent, let's talk about a law that takes this in a slightly different direction.
Okay.
Law 15. Crush your enemy. Totally.
Okay, now this one sounds intense.
It is. It's not necessarily advocating violence, but it's about recognizing that in the game of power, leaving a wounded opponent can be dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
To really secure your position, sometimes you need to completely neutralize a threat.
Makes sense.
So Greene tells this story of Wu, a concubine who rises to become Empress of China.
Wow.
She's born into this world of intense power struggles, and she learns quickly that to survive, you gotta be ruthless.
So this is a story about survival.
Yeah, about the lengths people go to when their power is threatened.
Right.
And Wu did what she had to secure her position. It wasn't always pretty, but it was effective.
Okay.
She understood that even a tiny ember can reignite into a dangerous fire.
Right, so don't leave anything to chance.
Now, this might seem a bit extreme, but the principle applies on a smaller scale as well.
Okay, I see that.
Think about, rivals at work, competitors in business,
Yeah.
or even like negative thought patterns in your own life.
Oh, that's a good point.
Sometimes you need to take decisive action to eliminate those threats before they undermine you.
So it's about being proactive.
Exactly. Now, this idea of decisive action takes us to Law 19, isolate the victim.
Okay.
This is about understanding how power dynamics change when someone's isolated,
Okay.
cut off from their support systems.
And this is something we see all the time.
All the time, in history and in our lives.
Yeah.
So Greene tells the story of Lope de Aguirre, this conquistador who becomes obsessed with revenge, spends years hunting down his enemy.
Okay, wow.
It's a story about the destructive power of vengeance, but it also shows how important it is to understand these power dynamics.
Right.
When someone's isolated, whether it's physically, emotionally, socially, they become vulnerable.
Yeah.
They lose their power, their leverage, their ability to negotiate from a position of strength.
It's a good reminder that our connections, our relationships, those support systems, they're not just important for us personally,
Right.
but also in terms of power and influence.
Have you ever felt isolated, either personally or professionally? How'd that make you feel?
Yeah, I think we've all been there. And when you feel alone, like you don't have anyone in your corner, it's incredibly difficult to stand up for yourself, to go after what you want.
Exactly. It's like your power gets diminished.
Yeah.
So this brings up a fascinating point. The power of strategic non-commitment. And that's Law 20. Do not commit to anyone.
This sounds like playing the field, keeping your options open.
Right. Not letting yourself get tied down by alliances or obligations.
Okay.
So the example Greene uses is Queen Elizabeth I.
Oh, powerful woman.
One of the most powerful and successful monarchs in English history. She was so good at navigating those tricky political waters.
Yeah.
And one of her best strategies was refusing to commit to any one suitor.
She was the original power player.
Totally. By staying uncommitted, she kept all her rivals guessing. Nobody could form alliances against her. Nobody had too much influence.
So she's playing this game of non-attachment.
Strategic non-attachment. It let her maintain her independence, her freedom to act, and her power. Now, this law, again, might seem extreme,
Yeah.
but the principle applies to our lives too.
Okay.
Think about those times when you felt pressure to choose sides, to commit to something before you were ready.
Oh, yeah.
This law is saying, take your time, weigh your options, keep your autonomy.
Now, that idea of maintaining a sense of detachment and control takes us to a law that's both strategic and a bit mischievous.
Ooh, good.
Law 21. Play a sucker to catch a sucker. Seem dumber than your mark.
I love a good con. It's so fascinating how our perceptions can be swayed.
It really is. So what story does Greene use for this one?
He tells this great story about two con men, Arnold and Slack.
Okay.
They sold a fake diamond mine
Yeah.
using this combo of trickery and psychological manipulation.
Okay.
They basically pretended to be these simple, uneducated prospectors who'd stumbled onto a fortune.
So they were playing dumb.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Acting like they didn't even fully grasp the value of what they'd found.
Okay.
And it worked. Their victims, blinded by their own greed, thought they were smarter, more sophisticated.
Right. Thought they could take advantage.
Exactly. But in reality, it was Arnold and Slack pulling the strings the whole time.
Classic case of underestimating your opponent.
Right. Letting your ego blind you to what's really going on.
Yeah.
This law makes you think about not taking anything at face value. Be skeptical. Look beyond the surface.
Yeah. What are the true motivations here?
Exactly. Sometimes the people who seem the least powerful are actually the ones in control.
Now, that idea of strategic deception takes us to a law that's all about focus.
Oh, okay.
Law 28. Concentrate your forces.
Okay.
And this one, I feel like, applies to just about everything. Business, relationships, personal goals.
Yeah.
What's the main idea here?
Greene's saying that spreading yourself too thin is a recipe for disaster.
Right.
To really achieve power, you've got to focus your energy, your resources, your attention on a specific goal.
So it's about prioritizing, not letting those distractions
Yeah.
sidetrack you.
Exactly. So he uses the Rothschild family as an example.
Oh, okay.
They built this massive financial empire. And they did it by carefully concentrating their power and their resources. They understood that trying to be everything to everyone would make them weak.
It makes me think about all the times I felt overwhelmed, having too much on my plate. It's a good reminder, sometimes less is more.
It is. By focusing on what really matters, by eliminating distractions, we can accomplish so much more.
Now, this idea of strategic focus takes us to Law 29, plan all the way to the end.
Okay.
And this one, I think, is crucial for anyone who wants to achieve anything significant.
Yeah, it's about having a vision, a roadmap, a clear understanding of where you're going and how you're going to get there.
Exactly. And Greene's point is, success is rarely an accident.
Right.
It's the culmination of planning, anticipating those obstacles, having backup plans.
And he tells two really interesting stories to illustrate this.
Okay.
First is Vasco Núñez de Balboa, Spanish explorer who had this grand vision. He wanted to cross Panama and claim El Dorado for Spain.
Wow, so he had a plan.
He knew this was a major challenge, that he needed more than just brute force.
Right.
He needed to secure alliances, gather supplies, navigate tricky terrain, and anticipate potential conflicts.
So he was really thinking it through.
Meticulously.
Okay.
And it paid off. He successfully crossed Panama, became the first European to see the Pacific Ocean from the American side.
That's incredible.
It shows the power of planning, having that clear vision and the steps to get there.
Okay, so what's the other story?
He contrasts Balboa's success with Woodrow Wilson's disastrous punitive expedition against Pancho Villa.
Okay, I remember a bit about this.
So in 1916, Pancho Villa, Mexican revolutionary general, leads this raid into New Mexico. President Wilson, determined to capture Villa, sends General Pershing to lead an expedition into Mexico.
This is a classic example of what can go wrong without planning.
Right.
The expedition just got bogged down.
Logistical challenges, fierce resistance from Villa's forces, tense relations with the Mexican government. It was a mess.
Total failure.
And in the end, they didn't even capture Villa.
Wow.
So Greene uses these two stories to really highlight the importance of thinking ahead, not underestimating your opponent, having those contingency plans.
It's like that saying, fail to plan, plan to fail. Even with the best intentions, a lack of planning can lead to disaster.
Absolutely.
All right, those stories really highlight the importance of strategic thinking, anticipating obstacles, having backup plans. It's about having that vision, the roadmap. Now let's move on to a law that's a bit more about emotional mastery.
Okay.
Law 33. Disdain things you cannot have. Ignoring them is the best revenge.
Ooh, this one sounds intriguing.
It really is. I can see how ignoring something you want could be a really powerful statement. It's about knowing when a battle's not worth fighting.
Choosing your battles.
Exactly. So what story does Greene use to illustrate this?
He tells the story of King Henry VIII and his quest to get his marriage annulled so he could marry Anne Boleyn.
Oh, major political and religious crisis.
He was defying the Pope,
Yeah, incredibly high stakes.
but he used disdain to his advantage.
So how did he do that? Did he try to negotiate with the Pope?
He basically gave the Pope the silent treatment.
What?
Stopped acknowledging Catherine as his wife, called her his sister-in-law, even moved her to a different residence.
So he was acting like she didn't exist.
Exactly, trying to erase her from public life.
Bold move.
But you know what? It worked. By refusing to engage in this direct power struggle with the Pope, by seemingly ignoring the situation, Henry actually shifted the balance of power in his favor.
Wow.
It put huge pressure on the Pope, forcing him to acknowledge the situation and eventually grant the annulment.
It's amazing how ignoring something can be more effective than directly engaging with it.
Right.
Like sometimes the best revenge is just moving on.
Have you ever been in a situation where you used this tactic?
Yeah, I think we all have. And sometimes the best way to deal with a difficult person or situation is just to disengage. You don't give it your attention, your energy, your reaction, and it loses its power over you.
You're right. We have more control over our reactions than we realize. We can choose to fuel the drama, or we can just starve it.
Exactly. Now, this idea of strategic detachment leads us to a law that's a bit more mischievous.
Okay, I like where this is going.
It's about playing with people's emotions a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Law 39. Stir up waters to catch fish.
Okay, interesting.
This law is all about using emotion, especially anger, to your advantage. Greene tells this funny story about the Duchess of Marlborough and the architect John Vanbrugh. The Duchess was notorious for her complaining.
Oh, no. She made Van Bru's life miserable during the construction of Blenheim Palace.
Oh my gosh, like a micromanager,
Huh?
backseat driver on an architectural project?
She was relentless.
I bet.
But, while her nagging drove Van Brugh crazy, he got his revenge in a clever way.
Yeah.
He incorporated little design elements into Blenheim Palace that mocked her complaints, made her a permanent part of the building.
Oh, that's brilliant, like a passive-aggressive architectural masterpiece.
Totally.
But it shows that even negative emotions, like anger, can be used strategically.
Yeah, if you provoke someone's anger, they might act rationally, and you can use that.
It's a good reminder that emotions can be weapons.
Both for you and against you.
Yeah, that's true. This law makes me think about all those times I've let my own emotions get the best of me, reacting impulsively instead of strategically.
Right. It's a good reminder to stay calm and objective.
Okay, so you've talked about the power of silence, the strategic use of emotion. Let's move on to a law that combines both.
Okay, which one's that?
Law 16. Use absence to increase respect and honor.
Oh, interesting.
This is about strategic withdrawal, making yourself less available, creating that sense of scarcity.
Okay.
So Greene tells the story of Deioces, this ancient median judge, known for his fairness and wisdom.
Okay.
People flocked to him for his rulings.
I can imagine.
But he realized being constantly available was diminishing his authority.
Like he was taken for granted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Happens all the time. When something's readily available, we don't value it as much.
That's so true.
So Deioces did something radical.
What'd he do?
He withdrew from public life completely.
Wow.
And people quickly realized how much they valued his presence, his insights. They begged him to come back, to rule them.
So it worked.
Yeah, by making himself scarce, he increased his perceived value and ultimately gained more power.
Wow, that's a great story.
It's a fascinating example of how stepping back can be the most strategic move.
Yeah.
It's about creating that mystique, making people appreciate you more when you are around.
And I think that applies in our own lives as well. Think about how you feel when someone's constantly demanding your attention, your advice, your approval.
Yeah.
Do you feel valued or taken for granted?
It's definitely something I've experienced, and I think we all have. When you're always available, people just assume that your time and energy are unlimited.
You're right.
It's important to set those boundaries, to create space, to make it clear that your time and attention are valuable.
So true.
Now, this idea of creating that sense of longing, of desire, leads us to Law 32.
Yeah?
Play to people's fantasies.
Ooh, I like this one already.
It's about understanding the allure of the impossible, the power of dreams and desires.
Yeah.
And Greene's argument is, we all have those fantasies, those secret desires we want to fulfill. And people who can tap into those fantasies, who can offer a glimpse of that world where those desires become reality, they have a lot of power.
Okay, yeah, I see that.
He gives the example of Bragadino, this alchemist who captivated Venice with the promise of turning dust into gold.
Oh, wow.
The classic alchemical dream.
But alchemy's about actual transformation, isn't it?
It is, but Bragadino is more of a showman than a scientist. He understood that what people really wanted was the fantasy of wealth, the dream of escaping their everyday lives.
So he was selling a dream.
Yeah, and people bought it because they wanted to believe.
They needed to believe.
It's about the psychology of belief, that people are often more persuaded by emotion than by logic. It's a reminder that we all have those blind spots, those vulnerabilities, those desires that can make us susceptible to manipulation.
Yes.
But it's also a tool for good, right? Think about the role of inspiration, of hope, of vision in motivating people to achieve great things.
Absolutely. The ability to tap into people's emotions, to inspire them, to give them hope and purpose, it's incredibly powerful.
Now, we've talked about the power of illusion, of playing to people's fantasies. Let's move on to a law that's about knowing when to hold back,
Okay.
when to restrain yourself. Law 48, assume formlessness.
Okay.
And this one's about the power of adaptability, being like water, flowing around obstacles, changing shape as needed.
Yeah, not being rigid, not clinging to fixed plans.
But it's not about being passive, it's about being strategically fluid.
Okay, got it.
To show the dangers of rigidity, Greene uses the Spartans as an example.
Oh, interesting. The Spartans, they were all about structure and order.
Exactly. And that was ultimately their downfall. They were so focused on maintaining their rigid system, their warrior culture, that they couldn't adapt to the changing world around them.
Right.
They became stagnant, predictable.
Vulnerable.
Exactly. It's a cautionary tale about being too set in your ways, too attached to a particular way of doing things. The world's constantly changing. And to succeed, we need to change with it.
That's a really good point.
Think about those times you've held on to a plan, an idea, a belief, even when it wasn't working for you anymore. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let go.
Yeah.
Surrender to the flow. Let yourself be reshaped by the changing circumstances.
It makes me think of like the importance of flexibility and adaptability.
Yeah,
It's not just about success.
it's about survival.
Yeah.
Now, this idea of adaptability leads us to a law that's all about knowing when to stop, when to walk away from the table.
Okay, which one's that?
Law 47. Do not go past the mark you aimed for. In victory, learn when to stop.
I like this one. It's about recognizing that success can be intoxicating
It can.
and it can cloud your judgment. Sometimes the hardest thing is knowing when to walk away with your winnings.
Oh, yeah, well, you're ahead.
Exactly. So Greene uses the story of Cyrus the Great to illustrate this. He was a powerful Persian king, known for his military conquests. He understood the importance of knowing when to stop. He knew that pushing too far could lead to disaster.
So recognizing your limits, not letting ambition get the best of you.
Exactly. So he was engaged in this war against the Massagetæ, fierce nomadic tribe, and he was winning, having a series of victories. But instead of being content, he decides to press his advantage, try to completely crush his enemy.
Oh, a classic case of overconfidence.
Totally. And he underestimated his opponent. He gets lured into a trap and killed,
Oh, no.
and his vast empire is thrown into chaos.
Wow.
So this story is a cautionary tale about hubris, letting success go to your head. Even the most powerful, the most successful can fall prey to that desire for more.
It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest victory is knowing when to stop.
Yeah. Being content with what you've achieved.
Now let's talk about a law that's all about mastering the art of communication. Law 4. Always say less than necessary.
Okay.
This one's about cultivating that aura of mystery,
I like it.
making people work a little harder to understand you.
Okay.
And Greene's argument is, by saying less, you actually create more power and authority
Interesting.
because you make people fill in the blanks, right?
Yeah. Host.
Speaker. So he was selling an illusion, a dream. And people were buying it because they wanted to believe. They needed to believe.
Exactly. It's about understanding that psychology of belief. People are often persuaded more by emotion than logic.
We all have our blind spots, right?
Agreed.
Those vulnerabilities.
Absolutely.
But it can also be used for good. Think about how inspiration, hope, vision can motivate people to do great things.
That's right. The ability to inspire people, give them hope and purpose, it's incredibly powerful. It can be a force for good.
Okay, so we've talked about illusion, playing on those fantasies. Now let's talk about a law that's about knowing when to hold back, when to restrain yourself.
Okay.
Law 48. Assume formlessness.
All right.
It's about adaptability,
Oh, okay.
being like water,
I like that.
flowing around obstacles,
points.
changing shape,
Yeah.
not being rigid, not clinging to those fixed plans or ideologies.
Okay, I get it.
And to show the dangers of rigidity, Greene uses the example of, guess who?
Who?
The Spartans.
Oh, wow, interesting. Because they were all about structure and order.
Exactly. That was their downfall. They were so focused on maintaining their system, their warrior culture, that they couldn't adapt when the world around them changed.
Right.
They became stagnant, predictable.
And ultimately vulnerable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a cautionary tale about being too set in your ways,
Yeah.
too attached to a particular way of doing things.
Yeah.
Because the world changes.
It does.
To succeed, you have to change with it.
That's a good point.
Have you ever held on to a plan, an idea, even when it wasn't serving you anymore?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Sometimes the most powerful thing is just letting go,
Yeah, you're right.
surrendering to the flow, being open to being reshaped.
Makes me think about the importance of flexibility and adaptability.
It's not just about success, it's about survival.
Absolutely.
Now, that idea of adaptability leads us to a law that's about knowing when to stop, when to walk away.
Okay.
Law 47. Do not go past the mark you aimed for. In victory, learn when to stop.
Oh, I like that one.
It's about recognizing that success can be intoxicating, right?
Totally. Yeah. And it can really cloud your judgment. Sometimes the hardest thing is knowing when to walk away with your winnings.
Quit while you're ahead, right?
Exactly. So Greene uses Cyrus the Great to illustrate this. He was a powerful Persian king.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, known for his military conquests.
Okay.
And he understood how important it was to know when to stop.
So recognizing your limits, not letting ambition get the best of you.
Right. So he's fighting this war against the Massachi, this fierce nomadic tribe,
Yeah.
and he's winning. Victory after victory. But instead of being content with his gains, he decides he's going to push his advantage, try to totally crush them.
I see where this is going. Classic overconfidence.
Totally. He underestimates his opponent, gets lured into a trap, and is killed.
Oh, wow.
His whole empire is thrown into chaos.
Wow.
So it's a cautionary tale
Mm-hmm.
about hubris, letting success go to your head. Even the most powerful people can fall prey to that desire for more.
Sometimes the greatest victory is knowing when to stop.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Being content with what you have.
Okay, now let's talk about a law that's all about communication. Law 4. Always say less than necessary.
Okay.
It's about cultivating an aura of mystery, making people work harder to understand you.
Interesting.
Greene says by saying less, you create more power and authority because you make people fill in the blanks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And he uses this great story about, you guessed it, Louis XIV, the Sun King,
Oh, of course.
a master of strategic silence. He was very deliberate with his communication. He would hold back, not reveal his thoughts or intentions, just leave people in suspense.
Oh, I bet that was effective.
It was. He kept them guessing, on edge, trying to figure out what he was thinking.
Keeps people off balance, right?
Yeah, makes them eager to please you.
It's a subtle form of control.
Incredibly effective. Now think about this in your own life. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's trying to get information from you? Like fishing for gossip, or trying to figure out your stance on something?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's natural to want to fill that silence, explain yourself, defend your position.
But sometimes the best strategy is to say less. Let people draw their own conclusions.
Yeah, I like that.
Maintain that air of mystery.
It does make you seem more powerful, more in control.
Now, this idea of strategic communication leads us to a law that's more about protecting your reputation.
Okay.
Law 26. Keep your hands clean.
Ooh, this is a good one.
So is Greene suggesting we manipulate people into doing our dirty work?
Not necessarily manipulation, but it's about realizing that power often comes with baggage.
Right.
Tough decisions, compromises, sometimes even unsavory alliances. This law is about finding ways to avoid being tainted by that baggage, to stay detached.
So protect your reputation, your image, even if it means letting others take the fall.
It's more about realizing you don't have to be directly involved in everything.
Okay.
Delegate, empower others, and you still maintain control of the big picture.
So you're strategically allocating your time and energy.
Exactly.
Now, this brings up an interesting point about change versus tradition, and that's Law 45. Preach the need for change, but never reform too much at once.
Oh, that's so relevant, especially today when things are changing constantly.
Absolutely.
People are resistant to change. Too much too fast can be really destabilizing.
Exactly. And Greene argues that change is inevitable,
Right.
but it has to be introduced strategically, gradually. He uses this fascinating example, the English Reformation.
Oh, wow.
That was massive upheaval, going from Catholicism to Protestantism.
So how does that fit with this law?
The mastermind behind it was Thomas Cromwell.
Ah.
Shrewd politician. He knew he couldn't just force this change on people overnight.
So how'd he do it?
He did it gradually, little by little. Started with small changes, chipping away at the Catholic Church's power. He dissolved monasteries, took their wealth, slowly introduced those Protestant ideas.
It's brilliant.
And it worked. By introducing change incrementally, he made it less threatening. And eventually, England became a Protestant nation almost without realizing it.
Wow. Amazing example.
It's a reminder that change is a process.
One event.
And you got to be patient, strategic. People need that sense of continuity.
Makes sense. Now, this brings up a point that might seem to contradict some of the other laws we've talked about.
Okay.
The importance of connection and collaboration. And that's Law 18. Do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous.
Now, this one seems counterintuitive because don't powerful people often isolate themselves?
They do surround themselves with layers of security, yes men.
Yeah.
And Greene says that's a mistake. Because isolation, while it seems protective, actually makes you more vulnerable.
Oh, okay.
You cut yourself off from valuable information, potential allies, the flow of ideas and energy that keeps power going.
So it's a false sense of security.
Exactly. He uses Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, as an example. He was obsessed with immortality, incredibly paranoid, feared assassination, rebellion, the works.
So he built walls, both literally and figuratively.
Right. And it backfired because his isolation actually made him more vulnerable. He lost touch with his people, with the reality outside his palace walls, became a prisoner of his own paranoia.
It's a reminder that true power comes from connection, building relationships, being open.
It does. Now, this emphasis on connection and collaboration takes us to a law that's a little more about strategy and deception.
Okay.
Law 3. Conceal your intentions.
So keep your cards close to your vest. Don't let people know what you're really thinking.
Exactly. Greene says, by concealing your intentions, you have a strategic advantage. Keep your opponents guessing, reacting to your moves instead of anticipating them.
You're in control.
Right. So he tells this great story about Otto von Bismarck.
Oh, the Iron Chancellor.
Right.
He was instrumental in unifying Germany.
Master of political maneuvering. He knew the importance of keeping his goals hidden.
So was he just a naturally secretive guy?
He was very good at playing his cards close to his chest. He would use misdirection, make bold statements, take seemingly aggressive actions.
To distract his opponents.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Throw them off the scent of his real objectives.
Creating a smokescreen.
Yeah, diverting attention from his true plans.
Yeah.
But to do that, you need a deep understanding of your opponent, their psychology, their fears, their motivations.
Yeah, you got to know what makes them tick.
Absolutely. Bismarck knew that by controlling the narrative, by shaping how his opponents saw him and his actions, he could manipulate them, get them to make decisions that would help him.
Power's a game of perception.
It is. It's about knowing how to influence how people see the world, how they interpret things.
Yeah, this idea of shaping perceptions, controlling the narrative, takes us to a law that's all about timing.
Yep.
Law 35, master the art of timing.
Timing is everything.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you know when the right time to act is?
Greene's not just talking about waiting for the right moment. It's about creating the right moment.
Okay.
Understanding the flow of events, the rhythm of power, and knowing when to seize an opportunity. He tells the story of Joseph Fouché,
Okay.
French politician who managed to survive the French Revolution and the Napoleonic era.
That was a time of incredible upheaval.
Total chaos.
So how do you stay in power through all of that?
He was a master of timing. He knew that rushing in could be fatal, so he watched the political climate, identified the key players, waited for the right opportunity to make his move.
Like a chameleon.
Yeah, adapting, biding his time, then striking when the iron was hot.
But that takes incredible patience and self-control.
It does. Sometimes the most powerful action is no action at all. It's about waiting for the right moment, when the stars align, before you make your move.
Sometimes the greatest victory is through strategic inaction.
Mastering patience and restraint.
Now, this idea of choosing your battles wisely, of knowing when to act and when to hold back, leads us back to a law we talked about earlier.
Okay.
Law 36. Disdain things you cannot have. Ignoring them is the best revenge.
Right.
Sometimes the most powerful action is no action at all.
Yeah.
So Greene says, by ignoring something, by not giving it your attention or energy, you diminish his power over you.
Yeah.
He uses the story of Henry VIII again, with his quest to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon.
Oh, right.
He wanted to marry Anne Boleyn. This was a huge deal. He was defying the Pope.
Yep, scandal.
So how did he use this strategic indifference to get what he wanted?
Instead of fighting the Pope directly, Henry just started ignoring Catherine.
Really?
He stopped acknowledging her as his wife, refused to see her, had her move to a separate residence.
So basically, he acted like she didn't exist.
Exactly. Tried to erase her from public life.
That's a bold move.
But it was brilliant. By publicly disdaining her, refusing to engage in a power struggle, he actually shifted the balance of power to his side.
Wow. It's amazing how powerful a statement of indifference can be. It's like you're saying, you're not even worth my attention.
Exactly.
Sometimes the best way to win a battle is to refuse to fight it.
It's true.
This law makes me think about all those times I've wasted energy on things I can't control.
Yeah.
It's a reminder to focus on what I can influence and let go of the rest.
It's about realizing that we often give power to things by focusing on them, letting them take up space in our minds and hearts.
Now, this idea of controlling your attention leads us to a law that's about the power of belief. Law 27. Play on people's need to believe to create a cult-like following.
Ooh, this sounds a little bit like the dark side of power.
Yeah, it does.
Wow.
Is Greene saying we should manipulate people's beliefs for our own gain?
It's not necessarily about manipulation. It's more about recognizing that people have a deep need to believe in something.
Okay.
Whether it's a religion, an ideology, a charismatic leader, even a brand.
Right.
And those who can tap into that need can gain incredible power.
So it's about creating that sense of belonging, a community of believers.
Exactly. It's about understanding how belief works, realizing that people are often persuaded more by emotion than logic.
This law makes me think about cults. how charismatic leaders can manipulate people by giving them that sense of belonging, a purpose.
That's a great example.
Hmm.
But it goes beyond cults and religion. This law applies to politics, marketing, anything where someone's trying to build a following, inspire loyalty.
So it's a reminder that we all have those vulnerabilities, desires that can make us susceptible to manipulation.
It is. But remember, it can also be a force for good. Think about how inspiration and hope can motivate people to do amazing things.
Absolutely.
Now, this brings us to a law that's all about making a lasting impression. Law 37. Create compelling spectacles.
Oh, this one sounds like it's straight out of Hollywood.
It is a bit. It's about understanding the power of visuals, of creating those memorable experiences.
Creating an aura.
Right. A mystique.
Yes.
Setting yourself apart.
Greene uses Julius Caesar as an example. He was a master of spectacle. He staged these elaborate triumphs to celebrate his victories. Gladiatorial games had coins with his face on them.
He was creating a brand, a personality cult, way before those concepts even existed.
Exactly. He knew that power wasn't just about force. It was about capturing the hearts and minds of people.
Right.
So you don't have to be a Roman emperor to use this law. Think about how we create spectacles in our own lives. Social media, public speaking, even the way we dress.
It's about first impressions, creating an experience people won't forget.
Now let's talk about a law that's about the hidden costs of favors and obligations.
Okay.
Law 40. Despise the free lunch.
I like this one. There's no such thing as a free lunch, right?
Exactly.
There's always a price.
So what's the danger of accepting a free lunch?
Greene's saying those free lunches are often a way to create obligations, to make you feel indebted, to put someone in a position of power over you. Powerful people know this.
So you got to be careful about those strings attached.
Right. Maintain your independence, your freedom to act. Be cautious.
It's about knowing that every interaction, every transaction has a power dynamic.
Absolutely. Be aware of those dynamics to protect your interests.
Now this brings up a fascinating point about trust and loyalty. Law 2. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies.
This one's a bit ruthless.
Yes, is Greene saying we should betray our friends?
It's not about betrayal, but it is about realizing that friends can be just as dangerous as enemies, especially when it comes to power.
Okay, I see that. So friends can have hidden agendas, right?
Right.
Their ambitions might not align with yours,
Exactly. And Greene says friends sometimes have a harder time saying no.
which makes them easier to manipulate.
Right. And their envy can be just as harmful as any enemy's malice.
It's about maintaining that healthy skepticism, even with people you're close to.
Yeah.
But what about using enemies? How can an enemy be helpful?
Greene thinks enemies can actually be valuable. They keep you sharp, force you to be more strategic. They can even show you your own weaknesses.
Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Exactly. By understanding your enemies, their motivations, their tactics, you can gain an edge.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, this emphasis on strategic thinking leads us to a law that's all about delegation, leveraging the talents of other people.
Okay.
Law 7. Get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit,
Ah, the art of delegation.
but with a Machiavellian twist.
A little bit.
Greene says that powerful people understand the value of outsourcing, of finding talented people who can execute their vision.
Okay.
But, he says, make sure you're the one getting the credit.
It's about being the conductor of the orchestra.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
architect of the plan, even if you're not playing the instruments or laying the bricks.
Right.
So Greene uses Fra Filippo Lippi, the Italian Renaissance artist, as an example for this.
Okay.
Now, Lippi had an interesting life. At one point, he was captured by pirates.
No way. A pirate's captive.
Yeah,
That doesn't sound very good for an artist.
not ideal. But he was resourceful. He used his talent to his advantage.
Ow.
He painted the pirate captain's portrait,
Oh, smart.
and the captain was so flattered he let him go free.
Wow, he charmed his way out of captivity.
He did. And that experience taught him a valuable lesson. He realized he could use his talent to get other people to do the work for him.
Okay.
He started taking on these huge commissions, and then he'd hire assistants to help him paint the pieces.
He focused on the overall design and took the credit, of course.
It's a great example of how to leverage other people's skills.
Right. But this doesn't mean you exploit people or take credit for work you didn't do. It's about recognizing that you don't have to do everything yourself.
Right. Collaboration, delegation.
It's about knowing your strengths and weaknesses, finding the right people to fill the gaps.
Now, this brings up a really interesting point about knowing when to change course, abandon a failing strategy,
Okay.
and that's Law 46. Never appear too perfect.
Interesting.
It's about recognizing that appearing perfect can actually be a bad thing.
How so?
It can make you seem unapproachable, even threatening.
Okay.
Greene says it's often better to reveal a flaw or two just to make yourself seem more human, more relatable.
So, show some vulnerability.
Yeah, but isn't that risky in the game of power? Wouldn't people see that as weakness?
It's about finding that balance between confidence and humility. People don't trust someone who seems too good to be true.
It's like that saying, the tallest tree catches the most wind. If you stand out too much, you become a target.
Absolutely. Now, think about your own life. Have you ever felt pressure to present this perfect image at work, in your social life, online?
I think we all feel that pressure.
Yeah,
Especially with social media, it's like everyone's living this perfect life, and you start to feel bad about yourself.
right.
It's a good reminder that what you see on the surface isn't the whole story.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their struggles, their flaws.
Absolutely. It's about embracing those imperfections, your humanity. That's
Yeah.
what makes us interesting and relatable.
More powerful, ultimately.
Yeah. Now, this takes us to a law that's about timing and momentum. Law 8. Make other people come to you. Use bait if necessary.
This sounds like it's about being patient, not chasing after every opportunity.
It is. It's about recognizing that sometimes the best way to get what you want is to make yourself the prize.
Okay.
Create a situation where others are eager to win your favor, earn your attention.
So like creating that sense of scarcity,
Yeah.
desirability.
Exactly. And it's about understanding what motivates people, what are they looking for, and then using that knowledge to your advantage.
Okay, so how does Greene illustrate this one?
He uses the example of a beautiful courtesan who is sought after by tons of suitors.
Sounds like a complicated love story.
She understood that men are driven by conquest, by the thrill of the chase. So instead of being readily available, she played hard to get.
Okay.
She created this air of mystery, made them work for her attention.
So she was the prize.
Exactly. She became the object of desire, and that increased her power and influence.
Now, obviously, we're not saying you should play games with people's emotions.
Right.
But it is about realizing that people are often more attracted to what they can't have,
Absolutely.
or just out of reach.
That's so true.
Now, this emphasis on strategic thinking leads us to a law that's about knowing when to retreat, when to step away from a conflict. Law 23, concentrate your forces.
Oh, we talked about this one earlier.
We did. But I want to talk about it in the context of conflict resolution. So spreading yourself too thin, trying to fight on multiple fronts, is a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. It's about choosing your battles, focusing on what really matters.
Exactly. And Greene says, to be effective, you've got to concentrate your forces.
Your energy and resources directed towards one goal.
So instead of trying to win every single argument, you pick and choose when to engage.
And when to disengage.
Sometimes the most strategic move is just walking away.
Absolutely.
Knowing when to retreat is a strength.
Now, this emphasis on strategy and knowing when to disengage leads us to a law that's about the power of emotions. Law 10, infection. Avoid the unhappy and unlucky.
Okay, this one sounds a little harsh. Are we supposed to avoid people who are going through a tough time?
It's not about being insensitive.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that negativity can be contagious.
Oh, I see what you mean. Protecting your own emotional well-being.
Exactly. Negative emotions can spread, infect those around them, and powerful people know this, and they take steps to protect themselves.
So choose your company wisely. Surround yourself with positive people.
Right. It's about realizing that our emotional states are contagious and being mindful of who we spend our time with.
It's a good reminder. You have a choice in who you let into your life.
You do.
Yeah.
Now, this emphasis on protecting your emotional energy leads us to a law that's about manipulating appearances.
Okay.
Law 5. So much depends on a reputation guarded with your life.
I mean, this one seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Your reputation is everything. It's what people think of you, how they perceive you, and perception is everything in the game of power.
Exactly. Greene argues that your reputation is a powerful tool. It needs to be protected.
Okay.
A good reputation can open doors, create opportunities, even shield you from criticism.
So be mindful of your actions, your words, the company you keep.
All of it.
It all adds up to the image you project to the world.
Exactly. And even small mistakes, things that seem insignificant, can damage your reputation beyond repair.
It takes a lifetime to build a good reputation, but only a moment to ruin it.
Right.
I think we've all been in those situations where our reputation was on the line. We had to be super careful.
Definitely.
Now, this idea of managing perceptions leads us to a law that's about using your enemies to your advantage.
Oh, okay. How do you do that?
Law 6. Court attention at all costs.
Now, this one's interesting. Why would you want attention from your enemies? Seems like it would just give them more ammo to use against you.
That's what I thought too.
But Greene says being ignored is actually more dangerous than being attacked. When you're ignored, you become irrelevant, invisible.
So you got to stay in the game, keep the conversation going.
Exactly. He uses P.T. Barnum, the famous showman, as an
Right.
example. Barnum was a master of self-promotion. He understood that any publicity is good publicity.
He was famous for those outrageous stunts, the crazy claims.
He wasn't afraid to cause a stir because he knew it would keep people talking about him, keep him in the spotlight.
Attention, even negative attention, is a form of power.
Exactly. It keeps you relevant. Now, you don't have to use Barnum's over-the-top tactics,
Right.
but it is about recognizing that visibility matters, whether you're building a brand, promoting a product, or just trying to advance your career,
Find ways to stand out, to be memorable.
especially in today's world. We're bombarded with information, distractions. You need to find a way to cut through the noise.
Now, that emphasis on attention and perception takes us to a law that's about the power of mystery and allure. Law 11. Learn to keep people dependent on you.
This one sounds a little manipulative. Are we trying to control people?
It's not about manipulation or control. It's about recognizing that people are drawn to those who can provide something they need.
Okay, like knowledge or resources.
Yeah, or even just emotional support.
So it's about being valuable, indispensable.
Exactly. So Greene uses this example of a really skilled physician who had a ton of loyal patients.
Okay, what was his secret? Was he just a brilliant doctor?
He was a great doctor, but he also knew how to create a sense of dependence.
Oh, interesting.
He would give his patients just enough information to keep them coming back, but never revealed everything.
Like a little bit of mystery.
Yeah.
Like a magician.
Exactly. By keeping them slightly dependent on him, he ensured their loyalty.
Smart. So people are drawn to those who can solve their problems.
If you can be the solution, you increase your power.
Now, this emphasis on creating that sense of dependence leads us to a law that's about choosing your battles. Law 13. When asking for help, appeal to people's self-interest, never to their mercy or gratitude.
This one seems counterintuitive. We're always taught to be grateful, show appreciation.
Right. Gratitude's important, but Greene says when it comes to power, appealing to people's self-interest is way more effective.
So you've got to understand what motivates them, what's in it for them.
Exactly. People are more likely to help you if they think they'll benefit.
Create a win-win situation.
Right.
Align your interests.
So he uses the example of this guy who wants to start a business, but he needs funding.
Okay.
Now, he knew that just asking for money wouldn't work. So he put together a solid business plan, showed the potential profits, how investing would benefit them financially.
Appealing to their desire to make money.
Exactly. And by framing his request in a way that highlighted their benefit, he was much more likely to get the support he needed.
That's really smart. People are motivated by self-interest.
More than we realize.
It's about framing your request to show how it benefits them.
Exactly. Now, this emphasis on strategic thinking leads us to a law that's about appearances and deception. Law 22. Use the surrender tactic. Transform weakness into power.
This sounds interesting. Why would you surrender when you're weak? Doesn't that just make you more vulnerable?
Greene says surrender can be a tactic, a way to disarm your opponent, buy you time to regroup.
Like you're lulling them into a false sense of security.
Right. So he tells this story of a small city-state that's about to be invaded by a much larger army.
Oh no, they're totally outmatched.
They were. But instead of fighting, they surrendered. They opened the city gates, welcomed the invaders, treated them well.
That's a risky move.
Very risky.
Nah.
But the citizens were so welcoming, so compliant, that the invaders relaxed, they got complacent.
Thinking they'd won easily.
Exactly. And while they were celebrating, the city-state attacked,
What?
drove them out, and got their freedom back.
Wow. So surrendering was a strategic move.
It was a way to turn weakness into power. Sometimes the best way to win is to appear to lose.
That's a good one. It's about understanding deception, using your opponent's expectations against them.
Absolutely. This law makes you think outside the box. Don't be limited by the usual ways of doing things.
Now, this emphasis on strategic thinking leads us to a law that's about mystery and allure.
Okay.
Law.
24.
Yeah.
Play the perfect courtier.
This one sounds like it's straight out of a movie. What's a courtier, anyway? And how does that relate to power?
So a courtier was basically a member of the royal court. They had to navigate all those tricky social and political situations in the palace.
It's all about etiquette, diplomacy, knowing the rules of the game.
Exactly. And Greene says those skills are still relevant today.
Okay, so what makes a perfect courtier?
They're masters of social intelligence. Reading people, understanding those unspoken rules. They're charming, diplomatic, and they know how to make themselves indispensable.
It's about having that grace, that poise,
Yeah.
being able to handle those tricky situations.
Hmm.
Have you ever been in a spot where you had to be extra careful about what you said, what you did? Like you had to navigate a complex social hierarchy.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
I think we all have, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Whether it's work, family, even just networking events.
There's always a social dynamic going on.
It's about being aware of those dynamics, knowing how to play the game without compromising yourself.
Absolutely. Now, this emphasis on social intelligence takes us to a law that's about setting boundaries.
Okay.
Law 25. Recreate yourself.
This one sounds like it's about personal growth.
It is. It's about understanding that we're not defined by our past. We have the power to change, reinvent ourselves, become someone new.
Shed those old identities.
Right. And Greene says powerful people get this. They're constantly evolving, adapting, reinventing themselves to fit the changing world.
So it's about being willing to let go of who you were to become who you want to be.
Exactly. He gives the example of a guy born into poverty, but he dreamt of a better life.
Okay, so he recreated himself.
How? He started by changing his habits, his mindset, even how he dressed and talked. He looked for new experiences, new mentors, new opportunities for growth.
Wow.
And eventually, he became the person he always wanted to be.
That's a powerful reminder. We're not limited by our circumstances, our past, or even our own ideas about ourselves.
So true. Now, this emphasis on personal transformation takes us to a law that's about perception and illusion.
Okay.
Law 30. Make your accomplishments seem effortless.
It's like a magic trick. How do you make hard work look easy?
It's not about pretending things are easy. It's about presenting your accomplishments with grace and ease.
Don't show your sweat. Make it look easy.
Exactly. Greene says people are more impressed by those who make things look effortless.
Okay.
So he uses the example of a skilled dancer. She'd spent years perfecting her craft. When she performed, she moved so smoothly, so gracefully. It looked effortless, like she was born to dance.
Right.
But what the audience didn't see was all the hard work, the years of training, the sacrifices.
Makes sense.
And by concealing the effort, she actually made her performance even more impressive.
Yeah, it creates a sense of awe.
Exactly. It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful things come from a combo of hard work and smart presentation.
Knowing when to show the effort and when to let the results speak for themselves.
Right. Now, this idea of strategic presentation leads us to a law that's about timing and momentum. Law 38. Think as you like, but behave like others.
This one sounds a little contradictory. How can you think one way and act another? Isn't that being fake?
It's not about being fake. It's about realizing that there are social norms, expectations, unspoken rules.
Okay.
It's about fitting in, reading the room, acting appropriately.
Being a chameleon, adapting.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you stay true to yourself at the same time?
It's a balancing act. You find ways to express yourself within those social norms. Sometimes fitting in is a strategic move.
Right. It helps you reach your goals without attracting unwanted attention.
Exactly. It's knowing when to conform and when to stand out.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, this idea of strategic conformity takes us to a law that's about the power of emotion. Law 41. Avoid stepping into a great man's shoes.
This is about legacy, the challenge of following someone who was really successful.
Right. What's so hard about filling those shoes?
Greene says when you try to replace someone who is super successful, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Because you're constantly being compared.
Exactly. You're living in their shadow.
So you got to make your own path.
Forge your own identity. Don't try to be someone else.
Right.
He tells the story of a king who took over from his father, a beloved and well-respected ruler.
So he had big shoes to fill. Did he try to be just like his dad?
He did, and it went terribly. People compared him to his father, and he just couldn't measure up.
He was in his father's shadow.
It really hurt his authority.
Wow. So the lesson is we all have our own strengths and talents. Trying to imitate someone else, especially someone super successful, is just going to lead to disappointment.
Exactly. Comparison is the thief of joy. True success comes from being yourself.
Okay, now this idea of forging your own path leads us to a law that's about timing and momentum. Law 42. Strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter.
Now, this one sounds a little ruthless.
It does. Is Greene saying we should target leaders to break up a group?
It's not about violence. It's about understanding that in any group, there are key people whose influence holds everything together.
A leader.
Right. And if you neutralize them, the group might fall apart. It's about finding that linchpin.
So he uses a rebellious army as an example. The general's the shepherd, the soldiers are the sheep.
Right. And the opposing forces knew that if they took out the general, the army would likely fall apart.
Okay.
And that's exactly what happened. The general was gone, and the army disbanded. No letter to guide them or inspire them.
It really shows how crucial leadership is.
It does. Now, this emphasis on leadership and influence takes us to a law that's about perception. Law 43. Work on the hearts and minds of others.
This seems to contradict all that stuff about manipulation and deception. Isn't Greene all about being cunning and strategic?
He is, but he also realizes that real power isn't just about forcing people to do what you want.
Okay.
It's about winning them over, inspiring loyalty and commitment.
Building relationships.
Well, exactly. Connecting with people on an emotional level. He uses this example of a political leader who wanted to unite his people.
Did he use propaganda?
Fear.
He was smarter than that. He knew people follow someone they trust. So he focused on building relationships.
Connecting with people.
Showing his empathy.
Being authentic.
Yeah.
Showing he cared.
Exactly. And by winning over their hearts and minds, he inspired a level of loyalty that force or manipulation could never achieve.
True power lies in inspiring people, motivating them to follow you because they want to.
Exactly. And that brings us to our final law. Law 44. Disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect. Okay, the mirror effect. What's that all about?
Greene says one of the best ways to disarm your opponents, to make them mad, is to mirror their behavior right back at them.
Oh, interesting. So you're reflecting their actions, their words.
Showing them their own hypocrisy, it undermines their authority.
It's like holding up a mirror to their flaws.
Right. So he uses this example of a young courtier who is being picked on by this arrogant nobleman.
Oh, so the courtier is the underdog here.
He is. But instead of fighting directly, he starts mimicking the nobleman, his mannerisms, his way of talking, those over-the-top gestures.
Yeah.
Subtly at first, but then he starts exaggerating it. Makes the nobleman look ridiculous.
Oh, that's clever. He's making him a caricature of himself.
Exactly. And it works. He exposes the nobleman to the whole court.
Wow, so he turned the tables. It's about using your opponent's own behavior against them.
Exactly. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, diving deep into the 48 laws of power.
We have. It's been a fascinating look at power dynamics with all these great stories and insights.
These laws are tools, not rules. They're meant to empower you, to help you understand how power works, so you can make better choices.
The power is yours.
It is. So I encourage everyone listening, pick up a copy of the 48 Laws of Power and explore these ideas for yourself. You might be surprised by what you learn.
And join us for our next deep dive. We'll keep exploring these ideas, stories, and strategies that can help you navigate life and achieve your goals.
Until then, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay empowered.